He is an example of someone who, although told to leave the hospital, refused to abandon his patients.
First of all, the United Nations did a study of U.S. cities. I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights, recognizes the human right of people to take refuge together safely on public land when the state fails to provide them with adequate housing.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. This first segment is going to be hard to view. There's nothing gory in it, but it concerns the torture murder of one of Gaza's best-known surgeons, Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh. We start with a video constructed by Middle East Eye on a new report by Sky News, a British news channel.
This is the recovery room, full darkness, no water, no electricity. But we have a hero, surgeons in Gaza.
These the words of Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, one of the best-known surgeons in Gaza, as he documented the situation at Al-Shifa Hospital last year. The conditions were deteriorating in the weeks that followed October 7th. So bad, in fact, there was nowhere left to store the bodies. Here, Al-Bursh and colleagues dig mass graves in the hospital compound. The Israelis said Al-Shifa was used as a command and control center by Hamas, and they placed it under siege. Patients, staff, and displaced residents were forced to evacuate. But Al-Bursh took a different path. The beginning of his story in Israeli detention. He worked at several hospitals nearby, these pictures taken at Al-Alda Hospital, the last images we have of Dr. Al-Bursh. He was detained several days later after the hospital director said the men had to leave. His colleague, Dr. Mohammed Obaid, was with him at the time.
فقال لنا أن قوات الاحتلال لديها كشف كامل بجميع أسماء الذكور ما بين 14 سنة و65 سنة في مستشفى العودة، ولقد قالوا له حرفيا إذا لم يأتي جميع الرجال الموجودين في الداخل فسيقوموا بتدمير مستشفى العودة وما فيه.
These drone images match his description of events. Obaid says the Israelis took 5 medical workers away, including Al-Bursh.
لديه إحساس أنه في مأزق شديد وأخذه ضابط الاحتلال وكانت المعاملة خشنة جدا.
Al-Bursh was sent to an Israeli army base called Stade Timan, used for processing detainees from Gaza. On arrival, he spoke to another doctor who'd been imprisoned at the facility.
He was so badly treated, so he was unable even to go to the toilet alone. So I thought he was beaten very badly.
Dr. Al-Bursh would remain in Israeli custody and was sent the following April to this prison called Ofer. Shortly after his arrival, he died.
News of the surgeon's death was announced quietly in May, the Israelis offering no explanation, no cause of death, nor have they returned the body to members of the family.
The regime at Ofer is harsh, something the prison service was keen to emphasize when an Israeli television channel was given this tour. And Sky News can reveal new information about Al-Bursh's death. A human rights lawyer has obtained a deposition from a prisoner at Ofer who said he witnessed the moments leading up to the doctor's death.
He had clearly been assaulted with injuries around his body. He was naked in the lower part of his body. The prison guard threw him in the middle of the yard and left him there.
The deposition says Al-Bursh was taken by an inmate to one of the cells.
A few minutes later, prisoners were heard screaming from the room they went into, declaring Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh have been martyred. Adnan Al-Bursh was not the first case of a person who was beaten and died in the prisons. Since this war, Before him were many and many cases.
Some people might say, some people will say, that Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh was a terrorist.
Like, if I want to answer formally to this question, he was not charged till now, and many of these detainees are not charged from Gaza.
The Israel Defense Forces told Sky News the death of Dr. Al-Bursh was not their responsibility. In a statement, the Israel Prison Service also denied responsibility for the death of the doctor. All basic rights required are fully applied by professionally trained prison guards. We are not aware of the claims you described, and as far as we know, no such events have occurred under IPS responsibility. This story is one of a countless number left buried under the weight of Gaza's recent past. Yet Al-Bursh was a much-loved figure in the territory. His death and the manner in which he died are deemed by many as unforgivable.
In New Haven, Connecticut, at the weekly vigil in front of Yale New Haven Hospital, several people carried Dr. Al-Bushra's photo.
All over the country. I've got to
You're holding a sign about Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh. Could you explain what happened to him?
So he's part of a larger story, and the larger story is the Israeli campaign to destroy the Palestinian society in general, and in Gaza in particular. And one of the pillars of that campaign is the destruction of the healthcare system.
Right.
If you destroy a healthcare system, well, here, pan around here, pan over here. So here's Yale New Haven Hospital, major employer for the New Haven area. Likes to call itself a world-class medical institution, and in some ways that's absolutely true. And without it, lots of people would just start dying of things that occur naturally that they wouldn't have treatment for. So a medical system is a pillar of any society, and Israel has destroyed the medical system in Gaza. And one of the things that they've done is to attack doctors and healthcare workers. And this is one of them. Hundreds of them have been abducted from the hospitals that they were taking care of patients in and taken off to a detention center in the desert where they have been tortured. Actually tortured from the get-go, because immediately they've all been stripped down to their underwear, blindfolded and put in zip ties behind their back, made to sit in uncomfortable positions for hours, and on top of that, in some cases, physically tortured, painfully tortured, genitally tortured, raped anally with clubs and iron rods. And he is an example of someone who, although told to leave the hospital, refused to abandon his patients and has paid for it with his life.
Here, an artist drew a picture in his honor. This photo is of Dr. Hani Badran, shortly after he learned that 17 members of his family had been killed by Israeli soldiers. You may have heard that when the aid trucks get into Gaza, they are often stopped by armed men and looted. Israeli mouthpieces say this is Hamas at work, But Mohammed Shahada writes this accusation: Israel is aiding ISIS-linked terrorists and criminals to sow chaos and famine in Gaza. Shadi al-Sofi, a wanted murderer and son of an informant collaborator with Israel, and Yasser Abu Shabab, a drug dealer, are the main warlords responsible for looting most aid under IDF protection. Seems quite plausible. Armed Palestinians are shot on sight, but these gangs are given free rein by the IDF. Shahada goes on to say that Hamas wounded al-Safi a few days ago, along with 30 of his men. Two events coming up in New Haven. On Saturday, December 7th, a talk in the New Haven Library about artificial intelligence. Sean O'Brien will lead a discussion called AI is Not Funny. It will start at 2 p.m. Billionaires may make new billions from AI, but the rest of us may soon face its negative effects, starting with its massive use of electricity. More about this at pepeace.org. 2 days later, in the same community program room, famed Palestinian activist and museum director Mazen Kumsia will speak at noon. A light lunch will be provided free. Register at thestruggle.org. Both events are free to the public. Now to Bronxville, New York State, to Sarah Lawrence College, where students are protesting college investments and apartheid and genocide.
As students, we owe it to our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We owe it to our brothers and sisters in Gaza to fight for them. To fight for them. Every university in Gaza. Every university in Gaza has been destroyed. Has been destroyed. Say it again. Every university in Gaza. Every university in Gaza has been destroyed. Has been destroyed. It's raining. I know it's cold. It's raining. I know it's cold. But at least we are not being crushed under the rubble. But at least we are not being crushed under the rubble. We are not being hit by bombs. We are not being hit by bombs. And we are not being struck by gunfire. And we are not being struck by gunfire. We are privileged. We are privileged. We must fight for those who can't. We must fight for those who can't. So please stay here as long as you can. So please stay here as long as you can. Bring all of your friends. I want everyone right now to text 5 friends. Bring all of your friends. I want everyone to text 5 friends. And tell them to get here. And tell them to get here. And defend our student intifada. And defend our student intifada.
More about this next week. For now, see the Instagram account SLC Divest. In our last two programs, we've had New Haven activist Marc Colville talk about his trip to Palestine. Today, we segue into what he says is a related project, his work for the unhoused in New Haven. Marc Colville works with the Amistad Catholic Worker House. So Amistad, if I have it right, Amistad House has been giving away food and food to the hungry for many years. When did that start?
1994. So we're into
decades, not years, decades.
31st year, yeah. And what we're doing here locally with regard to criminalization of homelessness really springs from our the mission, or sort of you'd call the charism of the movement that I'm involved in, the Catholic worker movement. It has to do with hospitality, trying to do hospitality in a radical way, where we try to gather, particularly, low income, poor people, get them together, build safe spaces and communities, etc. And traditionally we've done that here in the house. You have a house of hospitality that we have an open door for meals and all of that. And but about 10 years ago, we started getting involved in particularly like tent city movements for this reason, because well, first of all, the United Nations did a study of U.S. cities. I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights, recognizes the human right of people to take refuge together safely on public land when the state fails to provide them with adequate housing. That's a rule that's sort of enshrined now in the international consciousness since 1948. Now, and the UN did a study of U.S. cities 10 years ago in 2013, and they found, a plethora of laws, local laws in typical cities here that criminalize that behavior. That, in other words, they are blocking the assertion of that human right. So we felt, when we read that study, we felt, you know what, we don't. Not only do we need to take that seriously, we need to take it personally here in New Haven. That we need to be about changing some of these laws. So 10 years ago, we started on a low level basis, sort of taking over unused property, and then inviting people who are already living outside because they won't access the shelter system, which is basically a criminal justice system. It's a system of jails, institutions in which people are voluntarily incarcerated in order to get a bed, and then they're sent out every day. So we felt we've been sort of attacking the city policies regarding this for 10 years, and we've been demanding that the city designate one or more parcels of land on which people can do this without being brutalized by the police or criminalized. And of course, we get accused of being believing that people should sleep wherever they want, and that's what we say is that's exactly what the city's policy is. Because when you give people no place to go, they have to pick a place, and that's why people sleep on the green, under bridges, etc. Places where we don't necessarily want them to sleep. Okay, so we're just trying to say, hey, everybody has a right to a home. A tent is a home. People who live in tents are tenants, okay? And they have the rights of a tenant. So failing to do that, we've been petitioning the city to designate land for this for 10 years. And we have failed. They haven't done that. We did set up a very successful encampment over by the river here, about a mile from the House of Hospitality, that was up for 3 years, started when COVID started, and they closed all the shelters. Hundreds of people passed through there and lived there during 3 years. But the city was even sending people there. Okay, you call the 211 helpline, and there was no place else to go, so they'd send people over there. So it was obviously a necessary service. But about a year and a half into that, and again, it lasted for 3 years, we realized that the city wasn't going to change, and that they were eventually going to bulldoze that thing, and wipe out everybody's stuff and everything. And so we got ahead of that. We decided at the Amistad House that we would declare our backyard to be public land. And then we started inviting people who were being expelled and evicted from encampments like that to come and live with us in the backyard. So we've constructed a supported encampment. The House of Hospitality now the door is open 24/7. And we have about 15 tents in the backyard, along with now 6 tiny homes, which is a project that supporters of this project of the backyard put together at a cost of about $123,000. They built 6 tiny homes housing, upwards of, about 15 people. And so again, everybody has, we have this backyard supported encampment, and in the house, everybody can access 24/7, the bathroom, shower, and kitchen, and laundry.
Did you build extra bathrooms? I would assume that would be a
No, actually, we're trying to catch up, because this has become such a popular thing. that it's becoming overcrowded, and it has its problems in terms of being right here in the neighborhood. It's not ideal in terms of location, but it is very successful. Okay, now around that, again, we've been taking on this as an issue, the criminalization of homelessness. So we started organizing with people who are experiencing homelessness. Okay, we set up an organization called it's called UACT, Unhoused Activist Community Team, and Billy Bromage is another organizer that helped put this together 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And so what we've been doing is training people on how to exercise leadership, how to organize a campaign, how to fight City Hall to get policy and law changes that are going to serve people. And so we have a list of demands there, including obviously this designating, decriminalizing encampments by designating a land on which that can be done in a supported way. We're advocating for an entire village of tiny homes to be built, similar to one that has just been built in Providence, Rhode Island, and a couple of years ago in Burlington, Vermont. I believe there's upwards of 100 of these on a piece of land there. So we're trying to get to the city to reduce the incredible kind of misery that people who are homeless go through from being criminalized and moved on all the time, especially in the winter. Most recently, we decided to take this fight to the streets in another way. And that is, and many people in New Haven might be unaware of this, but it's been going on now for over a year that the city now has a policy the state actually too has a policy where at the train station, people take refuge in there at night. At least like 24 people on a typical night are taking refuge in there. So they started again over a year ago to just throw everybody out at 11 o'clock at night, and they can't come back again until the morning. So if you take a late train into New Haven, you'll see it. Every night, there's a bunch of people that have literally been placed out on the sidewalk in front of the train station, and they're sleeping there on the sidewalk, and people getting off the train just walk around them. Okay, so we decided that that's sick and inhuman, and that we were going to now accompany those people, and again try to set up a space where they can have, they can live in a tent and keep each other warm in a community space, and feed themselves and stuff like that. And we decided that we wanted to make this not only a work of hospitality, but also a public protest, a nonviolent direct action. We wanted to do this as close to City Hall as possible, just to bring to the mayor. Meanwhile, the mayor is cutting literally while we encamped on the green. We went and talked to the people at the train station who were getting expelled and said, look, we want to set up a safer space, and we want you to be there. So many of them took us up on that offer. We set up right behind the Congregational Church that's on the corner of Temple and Elm, which is right on the green. So we set up right behind there with some tents. We set up 25 tents. This is a week ago, Monday, with the intention of actually some allies like myself and some of the the Yale students have been involved in this as well. And so we set up 25 tents. In less than an hour, all 25 were filled with people who were unhoused. And so, and then the next day, the police came and they selectively enforced an old ordinance on the green that says you can't set up a tent without a permit. And so we took the tents down and decided to, again, sort of maybe taking a page out of the Palestinian liberation book, we decided we were going to stand our ground, we weren't going to leave. So we started an encampment without tents. We just stayed there. We would have.
Of course, there was a Occupy New Haven. If I recall, there were tents on the upper green for, my gosh, 7 months, taking a wild guess.
Yeah. So this is part of the overall, the picture of criminalization of homelessness. It's this selective application of the law. You take a certain, block of people and say, we're going to criminalize you for this. But, like if you were walking across the green with a bottle of alcohol in a paper bag, you might. And if you didn't look, if you're carrying, a couple of book bags, as typically unhoused people have to carry everything they own, then, you're probably going to get addressed by the cops for that. But if you're a Yale student with a bottle of wine sitting on the bench on the green, I don't think they're going to. Anyway, so you know how it goes. The law is weaponized against poor people. They have these, again, these local laws that are not law. I mean, because they violate, any law that's not, rooted in human rights or that blocks the assertion of human rights should not be kept. It should be broken. So we're kind of working with that concept here and trying to train people as leaders and activists, to say, hey, human rights, like the right to take refuge, that's not something that you're given by a city government or a law. It's not, or a constitution. It's yours by virtue of being human. Okay. And, when they're directly being blocked, you have to assert those rights. And so we're simply trying to get people a sense of personal and collective power in this way. Okay. One of the things that we realize from fighting these battles is that there is not one policy in terms of service delivery for unhoused people in the city or low-income people in general. Really, there are no policies that encourage the building of community or the identity of neighbor, for instance.
The conclusion of the interview on the program next week. That's all for today. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.